The best thing that happened to them during Mars Dasha was during Mars Venus. Venus manifests Mars as its lord. Venus rules the 8th house of inheritance and is placed in the 4th house of mother. And what happened? Their mother died during this time, and they got a small inheritance which helped a bit. It is a sad event, but it gave them a financial boost in Mars Venus. The topic of inheritance is sometimes not fully understood and maybe requires some clarification. Of course, we know the 8th house is broadly considered a house of inheritance, which is correct. But a more refined understanding is necessary. Right? The 8th house is the concept of inheritance, which means when someone dies, the 8th house is the channel through which inheritance becomes possible. Why? Well, when a person is not there anymore, what they left behind gets transferred to someone else. And first of all, of course, we know that the 8th house represents the transfer of the soul from one body to the next. And as part of this transition of the soul, the material assets that were left behind get transferred to other people. However, what we exactly inherit and from whom is of course important, and that is ruled by other houses. Family home, family properties, and family assets inherited from family members, such as one's parents, siblings, aunts and uncles, and so on, are ruled by the 4th house. And if you sell what you inherit, then the money you receive is ruled by the 2nd house. Now, if you inherit through your spouse or their family, then that would be considered a shared inheritance ruled by the 8th house, because it obviously comes through your partner. And then the property itself would still be ruled by the 4th house, because the 4th house rules all fixed assets, whether they are owned by yourself or co-owned with someone else. And if you sell that property when you inherit it, if the money becomes yours alone, then it will be a 2nd house matter. But if the money remains shared with your partner, then it's considered 8th house. And both the 2nd and 8th house are non-fixed assets, which means they're easily available for transaction. So yes, the 8th house is always involved when it comes to inheritance, as it rules the transfer of assets and property from the deceased to the surviving party. However, from whom and what exactly is inherited is ruled by other houses. And you might also keep in mind the 6th house, because that can come into picture when a lawyer is needed for legal procedures or even legal disputes. The 6th house also rules debt settlements or other liabilities that might be connected to inheritance. And so here during Mars Venus, this is when they got their inheritance. Mars rules the 2nd house of personal wealth and is placed here in the 8th house of inheritance. And Mars's Lord Venus is placed here in the 4th house of mother, family property, and family assets. And during the entire Mars Dasha, Mars Venus was the best period financially. Jupiter, Mercury, and the Moon are wealth manifesting in the D2, but those planets are not directly connected to Mars, either through aspect or conjunction or even rulership. And so they are not supporting Mars's wealth agenda. And so the only planet that could really help out Mars was its lord Venus. And while the Antardashas in Mars Dasha of Jupiter, Mercury, and Moon were financially better than those of Saturn, Rahu, Ketu, and the Sun, they weren't as good as Mars, Venus. And this is really an important principle to understand, that previously Moon, Jupiter, Moon, Mercury, they were great financial Antardashas, because Jupiter and Mercury had a direct connection to the moon. But here, Mars is not influenced by them. So make sure that the best planets in a Varga are connected to the Dasha Lord so they can give their full effects during their Antardasha. If there's no a little connection to the Dasha Lord, then the Antardashas of those planets won't make much of a difference. So what happened here during Mars Rahu and also Mars Saturn, they had health problems that forced them to stop their job, and they even got into debt. Luckily, they could recover during Mars Venus thanks to the inheritance, and they even managed to leave Mars Dasha just fine financially. So next comes Rahu Dasha. Now, Rahu Dasha doesn't look good for finances at all. Right? We have previously established that both Saturn and Rahu, these are like the most afflicted wealth indicators in the D2. Rahu is separating from financial opportunities and growth, as it is placed here in the second from the wealth Karaka moon. So right away in Rahu, she had a huge amount of financial problems throughout those, almost 3 years. Rahu, Jupiter could not make much of a difference. Again, it doesn't directly influence Rahu. Rahu, Saturn made it even worse, at least temporarily, right? And we find out why soon. But first of all, why did it get worse? Well, Saturn is afflicted, right? It is first of all in a natural enemy sign. It is sleeping. It is barely able to function. And then it is only afflicted here by malefic planets, namely Ketu, Mars, and the Sun. Now, normally, Saturn would literally just continue the financial decline and, just keep making the situation worse. However, Saturn is luckily in the 10th house. And a planet in the 10th house in any Varga becomes a manifestor in that Varga. And so now Saturn is capable of manifesting financial growth in the D2. And so Rahu Saturn, even though they suffered again from severe health problems and had to go into debt again, they were able to function in a limited capacity as a doctor and accept clients. Right? Their financial situation during Rahu Saturn was extremely stressful at some point, and it looked as if they could even lose their home, but luckily they didn't. And it was Saturn here in the 10th house that got them through this financially difficult period. Next follows Rahu Mercury. Mercury, at least, is a benefic planet. It can't directly help Saturn. And so this is not a period that's going to make a big difference financially, but at least it won't hurt them financially. And so nothing significant really happened during this time. The financial situation more or less remained the same. So now let's find out which third level dashas will be the best. Rahu, Mercury, Jupiter will be the most beneficial during Rahu Mercury. During this time they got more clients than usual and the finances went up. And this was also sort of the peak of their financial situation during Rahu Mercury. Right? Mercury has a financial agenda, by manifesting here the Karaka of wealth moon. And during Rahu, Mercury, Jupiter, with Jupiter manifesting Mercury from its own sign and through aspect, there was some financial relief. However, since Mercury is here not directly connected to Rahu, Mercury cannot consistently maintain wealth. And so after Rahu, Mercury, Jupiter, followed Rahu, Mercury, Saturn, and they lost their most important client and their financial foundation was gone. And this happened particularly during Rahu, Mercury, Saturn. So this was a very difficult time for them when they lost their client. Rahu, Mercury, Saturn, Mercury followed, and during this time they got some relief. Right? Mercury rules friends, and a friend that they haven't talked to for a long time helped them out. This was basically a gift from their friend that they were very grateful about. So what followed here was Rahu, Mercury, Saturn, Ketu. So Ketu is here conjunct Saturn and will give Saturn's results for also, and Saturn of course gives separation, but at the same time it's also a manifester. And Ketu's lord is the moon, who is in a very decent shape here. And so overall we can see that Ketu is not going to set them back, but it will give a bit of extra money and relief. Next follows Rahu, Mercury, Saturn, Venus. And Saturn rules Venus, but Venus is here separated by Rahu. And so we can right away see that this will be a difficult financial time for them. Yes, Venus here can give 25% manifestation. It is also here a wealth indicator as being second from the moon. But then it gets separated here by Rahu. It's further aspected here by those two malefics, Mars and the Sun. And so the weeks that followed here in Rahu, Mercury, Saturn, Venus were tough for this person. They got a client that paid well, but then had more expenses than usual. And so overall they were struggling during this time. So now let's zoom out a little bit and not lose sight of the bigger picture of this person's life. They are in Rahu, Mercury period at that time. And they have just gone through years of financial struggles and finally reached Rahu, Mercury. And this was definitely overall a better financial period. Yes, Rahu, Mercury is not connected to Rahu directly and couldn't consistently manifest results, but it is still a manifester of wealth, and in fact one of the most powerful wealth manifestors in the D2, but because it's not directly connected here to Rahu, it couldn't do it consistently and also just not give the full effects. And so again, the best is always when the Dasha Lord is directly connected and manifested by the Antardasha Lord, as this creates financial stability. When a Dasha Lord is not directly connected by the Antardasha Lord, then temporarily doing a third level Dasha can cause financial difficulties until a good third level Dasha arrives and give some relief. And if the Antardasha Lord overall is in a normal condition, then likely this will just overall maintain the financial situation. If it is better than average, then overall it will actually make it somewhat better, and if it's worse, then it will make it somewhat worse. But the best and worst effects are always when the Antardasha Lord is directly connected to the Dasha Lord.